All right, we are back here on the podcast, getting ready for the World Series here, and we have a New York team in the championship round for the first time since I started this podcast. So I'm very happy to bring back with me here to preview the Yankee Dodger World Series and sort of wrap up the Mets as well. Great SNY contributor Anthony McCarron is here. Anthony, how are you?
I'm good, Mike. How you doing?
Pretty good. Very exciting postseason for New York baseball here. I mean, we had the Mets make the deep run. The Yankees are in the World Series the first time in 15 years. Like, it's a baseball town again. It feels great.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been covering baseball in New York since 1999, and this is one of the great postseasons. We don't even know what's going to happen in the World Series yet, and I already count this among the great postseasons just because of all the sizzle in the city with both teams making these deep runs, and the Yankees were sort of expected, but I think a lot of their fans are like, well, they'll never do it. And then, the Mets were kind of unexpected, and they had a great run and played some tremendous baseball, over the last 5 months of the season, going into October. So it's been phenomenal. It really has.
Yeah, for sure. I think we should wrap the Mets first. Save the good stuff for really with the World Series, the Yankees here, because the Mets, obviously, we talked at the start of the postseason. They're about to play the Brewers. Said, this could be a good series. I don't know if the Mets can handle the Brewer running game. Looked like they blew the series. Pete Alonso hits the homer in the ninth inning to basically save them, and they go on this wild run. They knock the Phillies out, push the Dodgers 6 games. So I think the one takeaway here is the Mets were a lot better than we thought they were, but like I think they just ran to a better team in Game 6. Their pitching kind of ran out of gas.
Yeah. The Dodgers are better than the Mets. They proved it in the series, and look, they're loaded with talent, LA. But look, the Mets did some great things during the season, and they were kind of remade along the way too. I mean, and that's important to remember is that, and that, every team evolves during the season, but they really evolved into something that I don't know if anybody would have predicted, going back to April and May when they struggled a little bit. They started 0-5, uh, and you just looked at their roster and you were like, how are they going to get it done? They're not going to get it done. Are they going to be sellers? Oh my goodness. Do they want to be sellers? Like, would that be something that they would want to turn the roster over? And I mean, it was kind of a transition year this year anyway. And but listen, all credit to them, the players, the front office, Carlos Mendoza, who's clearly, to me, a brilliant manager. They kept persevering, and with tweaks and additions and guys playing great baseball, they really made something out of this season. And now this is one that I think Met fans are for years and years. It stings right now, and it should sting because you aren't guaranteed anything going forward. I know there's a whole narrative out there that the Mets are now set up for greatness, and it's just going to happen every single year. But you don't know that. The twists and turns of a baseball season are immense. And, so it's okay for this to hurt now because you got to the Final Four. You got so close to the World Series, 2 wins away. And, but there are reasons for optimism as well going forward. And, a lot of it is still on the roster.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I do think also the other thing to keep away here this season as a whole is like you say, it's something that brought a lot of fun and faith back to the Met fans who feel like became downtrodden over the years here. I remember we talked in March before the season started. You said, basically take everything to go right for them to make the playoffs. And that basically everything did go right after June. And it's crazy to think like the transition years you mentioned here, is 89 wins, 2 wins in the World Series, and they did get some answers on some pieces here that could help them for the future, especially like guys like Mark Vientos, they now know are part of their foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the good part of this. They have a lot of things going for them. Even though there's going to be a lot of roster churn, obviously, in the off season. They have a ton of free agents. Not everybody can be back. I've been sort of saying this, and maybe it's a little harsh, but the 24 Mets are gone now. That's over because of the business of baseball is about to get going after the World Series, and things will change a great deal. But the Mets do still have pieces in place. Vientos, as you mentioned, is one of them. Obviously, their superstar Francisco Lindor, who should finish second in the MVP voting, is another great base piece there. You go on with Francisco Alvarez, Brandon Nimmo, a few other guys. There's some top end prospects in the system as well. I can't wait to see what they do, how they deploy Luis Angel Acuna next year, because he was such an exciting addition when he did come up at the end of this season. They have a lot of work to do on the pitching staff. Three big free agents in Severino, Minaya, and Quintana. Not everybody's going to be back. And so there's a lot to work on here. But the other thing that they have in place now, in addition to Steve Cohen being a very rich owner, which is obviously a good thing, is David Stearns, who I think showed a lot this season in terms of remaking the roster in season and adding bullpen pieces. He remade the bullpen. It still wasn't a perfect Dodger or Yankee bullpen, which I think were better than the Mets, and maybe proved it by getting to where they are. But their bullpen was greatly improved. Their defense improved over the season. David Stearns with like a full go. I mean, I was at his press conference and he said, nobody in the player stratosphere or whatever phrase he used is going to be unavailable to us. So I think he told Met fans what they maybe want to hear there, that the Mets will spend if they think it's appropriate on guys. And there are certainly going to be some enticing free agents out there to add to the core.
Yeah, I did pull that quote up. He said you're the player universe potentially accessible to us. So that was
That's it. Universe.
yeah.
Player universe. I love it. Yes. Yeah. And that means, that the top end is something that I don't think that they were playing in the top end last offseason. This season, hint, hint, Juan Soto, I think they'll be playing in the top end of free agency, which adds a level of excitement to the winter for fans who are, going to be nursing that NLCS disappointment. But, there are some interesting and fun days ahead.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that Aussie as well, because obviously they have a lot of their own free agents. Obviously, Pete Alonso, those pitchers you mentioned, some of the key like bench guys on the mix, like Winker and Jose Iglesias are free agents. Because David Stern said, I have all this money on the books. I can basically shop wherever I want to if I feel like it here. So like it feels like the stage is set for the Mets if they want to do the 2008 Yankee offseason, just go get three of the biggest guys if they want to. But like I feel like it's a tough balancing act for David Stern sort of side. Like how much do I want to get every big star I can? Do I want to throw 600 million in one? So I want to get Pete 200. Do I want to go get Corbin Burns? Or I keep Sean Manaea? Do I value the chemistry that this group had bringing some of those key guys? It's a very tough balancing act for them this offseason.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I mean, the temptation is when you're a fan, you think of all these guys, the big names that you mentioned, and you're like, yeah, get him, get him, get him, and him. And, but all you need to do is look at the 24 Mets and, the chemistry sort of additions that they made to see what kind of outsized impact guys who maybe aren't bold-faced names can have. Who had Jose Iglesias being the vibe master of the Mets before the season started? Nobody did. That's who. And yet he became this integral part of their roster and their clubhouse, all of this stuff, and played really, really well for a long, long time. Jesse Winker added a certain, I like Jesse Winker a lot as a player because I feel like he gets under other teams' skin in addition to being, a good hitter. He had a great postseason. He had some big hits along the way. That would be a guy that I would look to bring back, if I were running things, just, because he can do so many different things for you and impact in so many ways. So yeah, they do there's a lot of work to be done. The pitching remake is going to be fascinating because there's bullpen issues as well and replacements that are going to be needed. And, you always have to, bullpens are always, you're always juggling these guys and trying to find the right mix and guys who hit. You find their bullpens are so combustible, relievers are so, can flame out so quickly that you want to get them on their good 6 months that they have. If that's what their career is going to be, then you want that good 6 months. And so it's a challenge to get to them. To me, Corbin Burns has got to be a guy that they look into heavily. They only really have two kind of sure things in their rotation on the roster right now in Senga and David Peterson. Tyler McGill, to me, will impact the rotation as well in some way. But, they need some more certainty there for sure. And, there's some big names out there that could be interesting.
Yeah, for sure. The Mets discussion, I think, is worth saving for another day because obviously the Yankees in the World Series kind of got to deal with that here. And we went to the postseason. This is before the wild card series where the Astros and the Tiger lost and Astros and the Orioles lost. And you said, just bring out all comers to the postseason. And even despite all that, The road seemed all up pretty nice for the Yankees. They got two teams they matched up very well with, and they took care of his. They lost total 2 games, got to the World Series. The Guardian series, I think, was telling because like there were moments where it looked like Cleveland get back in there, especially that gut punch of Game 3. But the way the Yankees responded and got to the World Series, I think, was a very telling indictment of this group.
Yeah, that ALCS, I think, is going to be one of those series that is sort of unfairly looked upon as like the Yankees only lost one game and, they advanced in five because the Guardians really gave them all they could handle and really created some incredible October moments in that series. The Yankees just got through, and and credit to them, as you say, because it wasn't easy, and they had to come up big as well. So look, the Yankees are insanely talented, and I know that even the fans who love them the most have always been really great at finding things wrong with that team. But they're really good. Their offense is relentless. They have a good starting rotation. I mean, let's put the starting rotations up against each other with the Dodgers. Who are you taking right now? And we're talking about the Dodgers, who have been a pitching tradition organization for a million years. Obviously, they've had a lot of injuries this year, but I think the Yankees have a huge rotation advantage going into the World Series. And look, their bullpen is very good as well. And, Luke Weaver has been a revelation as a new closer. Clay Holmes has sort of fit nicely into a setup role after losing the closer's job. He blew 13 saves during the season. Look, they're extremely dangerous. And one thing I want to address about the Yankees and their playoff run here is I know there are going to be cynics out there who say, well, they didn't have to get past the Astros because somebody else took care of them. Oh, I mean, how is that the Yankees' fault? They played who was in front of them. They beat who was in front of them. Now they're in the World Series.
They are here. I think the other big takeaway from the postseason for me is that like I've been saying this to friends off the air, saying it on the air here. I feel like playoff John Carlson is everything Yankee fans want playoff Aaron Judge to be. Like the man is incredible when the lights get bright this year, and like I hope Yankee fans remember this next time he doesn't leg out an infield hit in the middle of May next year.
Yeah, I mean, if you're whining about him not running 1,000% on a two hopper to short, then like, what are you doing even rooting in baseball? I mean, like, do you even like baseball?
Yeah.
Because Stanton has the ability to put a charge in a ball and take over a series the way he did in the ALCS. And look, those postseason home runs of his are incredible, and he has a knack for it. And I wish there is no metric that can explain clutch and can explain big moments and coming up in them. But I do feel like there's, even if it's not provable, that there's something to the idea that in a big moment, this guy, does something big. And he looms as a huge factor in the World Series against the Dodgers just because of that threat behind, two of the greatest offensive forces that we've ever seen in baseball in Juan Soto and Aaron Judge.
Yeah. Also crazy to think about too with the John Carlos situation. People don't really realize it because he's had these injuries to the Yankees couple of years here. Like he's not that far off from the Hall of Fame conversation either.
Oh, I think once it's all said and done, I think that he'll get into the Hall of Fame. He's look, depending on how long, I can't remember exactly how many home runs he has, but he's probably going to get to 500. And yeah, he's got a pretty solid Hall of Fame case going forward.
Yeah, I did pull it up. I was curious while we were talking. 429 regular season home runs entering this year, after this year.
Yeah, I mean, if he, look, if he stays together and has some health going forward here, I think he'll continue to be productive. I mean, will he play 162 games? No, probably not. But, if he gives you 100 games and it's 30 homers, that's a guy you can use on your team. Don't come at me with roster flexibility. Like if you get a guy who's hitting 30 homers in 100 games, that's all right.
It is all right here. And let's get to this matchup with the Dodgers here because we saw all the trouble the Dodgers gave the Mets in the NLCS. I know there were Met fans prior to season, saying, oh, the Dodgers are the matchup we want with the Padres. And I think they rather take that back now. But like, how do you think the Yankees match up with this team?
Look, it's going to be a very difficult series. Like we were saying before, I think the Yankee advantage here is in their starting pitching. And with that, I mean, hopefully for their sake, they've got two guys who can maybe get through the sixth inning, in Garrett Cole's case, maybe through the seventh inning, maybe through the eighth inning, if I'm going to get really nuts here with modern playoff baseball, and and sort of ease the burden on their bullpen because you saw in the Cleveland series that the Yankee bullpen, the workload caught up to them, I think. And the fact that the Cleveland hitters had seen them again and again and again, the same guys. I mean, Luke Weaver is tremendous, but it's easier for hitters, obviously, the more exposure they get to these guys. So if Cole and Carlos Rodon can get deep into games, limit the need for every brand name reliever in every single game, I think the Yankees will have an advantage there. We already know that the Dodgers are planning one bullpen game at least. Who knows how that'll work out during the series? But I feel like if they can get a number of licks at the Dodger bullpen, they can be gotten. Because I mean, if Jack Flaherty goes 2 innings in game one or whatever, I mean, he pitched great again in one game against the Mets, but his other two starts this October haven't been phenomenal. And if they start bouncing these LA starters early and get into the bullpen, then the exposure things comes up again, and I think that's where the Yankees have their advantage.
Yeah, I think for me, I think one of the things I'm watching this series here is obviously besides like the offensive matchup here, I think like can the Yankees like get the Dodgers like out and not destroy their bullpen here? Because if we saw with the Mets series here, the Dodgers are not going to chase out of the strike zone. They're going to make you throw
No.
good pitches here, and like if your bullpen is thinner than the Dodger bullpen, their whole mission is going to be get the starter out so we can get into like the lesser middle guys. Whereas like I think the Dodgers are 5, 6 high leverage guys, and they feel like maybe have three to really trust there.
Yeah, and that's fair. And that's why they do have to limit the workload. Look, the Dodgers shredded the Mets pitching in the NLCS, and part of the way they did it was, as you mentioned, they don't chase. Neither do the Yankees, for that matter. But the Dodgers set a record, I think, in any postseason series for walks. Now the Mets were sort of predisposed to walk people. That was one of their problems during the season as a pitching staff. And it really hurt. I think it hurt them in the NLCS. So yeah, that is definitely something to watch because that's how the Dodgers wear down their opponents, and put the squeeze on them. I don't think the Yankees are going to walk as many guys. Of course, the trouble when you're challenging the Otanis and Mookie Bettses of the world is that the ball can, it can be long and loud off the bat. So, we'll see what happens. But yeah, that is where the really fascinating part of this series comes from, I think, is both of these relentless offenses. I mean, something that really stuck out from the NLCS is, the Dodgers, I think they scored 8+ runs in every one of their wins over the Mets. And then when they lost, the two games they lost, one of them was they scored 3 runs, but the other one, they scored 6 runs. And in that game, I felt like the Mets just clobbered them, and the Dodgers still scored 6 times.
Yeah. It's this thing people don't appreciate with the Dodger lineup, and now I've seen it personally as a Met fan. Like I saw 6 games of it in a row. Here's that like I like the Philly series where like the Mets basically got the bottom of the lineup out and left nobody on for the big guys. Like the bottom of the lineup guys, whether it was like Tommy Edman, whether it was Kike Hernandez, Will Smith had his moments. Like those guys were getting on base and making life harder as you saw the top more often.
Right, and as Tommy Edmond taught us, that you don't have to be the biggest star in the game to have a huge impact on a series like that. I mean, NLCS MVP, I'm sure he wasn't even on the betting odds board before the series, and here you go, 11 RBI later, 400 plus batting average, and whatever his OPS was. Another thing that reminds me of another thing about the Dodgers. Tommy Edmond was, I think, fourth on the NLCS Dodger leaderboard in OPS, which is pretty scary considering he was the MVP. And Otani, I think it was Otani, Betts, and Max Muncy were above him OPS wise for that series. Their offense is amazing.
Yeah. So it's amazing here. And I think the key for the series obviously here is like obviously you got the big three at the top for both teams. I think this has to be the Aaron Judge moment here. I don't think they can beat the Dodgers if they're getting like a 160 average out of Judge in the World Series.
Yeah, and that's fair. And look, there is pressure on Judge to really come alive in this series. He had some impactful hits, obviously, against Cleveland. Uh, you know, but he's really got it. Like I think every Yankee fan on the planet is waiting for the Aaron Judge series, where he just absolutely goes nuts and hits three homers in one game and then has like a walk-off homer in another, makes a sensational catch in another game. Like I think that like I think it'd be great for the sport, to be honest with you, if he took over a series, and if this were the series on this type of stage between these, the traditional October rivals. These two teams have met more than any team in the postseason. And I think it would be fascinating for Judge to go off like that. There's always the talk about Aaron Judge doesn't hit in the playoffs. Aaron Judge doesn't hit in the playoffs. And, I think he's had one tremendous series, and the Yankees lost to Boston. I think it was in 18, if I'm remembering correctly. But whenever it was. Like this would be a great time for him to just absolutely go bonkers.
Absolutely here. So last question here is like, obviously we know the matchup. We've talked a bit about like all the factors here. What's your prediction how this series goes?
I think the Yankees are going to win, actually, but I think it's going to go the distance. I think it'll take 7 games. It also strikes me, and this goes against my prediction there, but this is one of those series where, if the Yankees take an early lead, if they go up 3-1, like I don't think that the Dodgers will fade away, and that offense is good enough to keep pushing and pushing and get it to 7 games. Ultimately, I think what we talked about before, I think the Yankees will be able to maybe protect their bullpen a little bit so that it keeps its elite pitching going. And, thanks to starters like Cole, I'm looking for him to come up with 2 huge starts. And, who knows, maybe a late series ace like relief appearance as well.
Yeah, for a fun series to watch over the next like week and a half or so. So Anthony, thanks for all the time. Really appreciate it. People on social media, keep up with your World Series coverage for SNY. How can I do that?
Either on the SNY website, sny.tv, or my Twitter handle is at Anthony McCarron.
All right, Anthony, thanks for all the time. Really appreciate it.
You bet, Mike. Enjoy the World Series.